The acrid smell of antiseptic in the hospital corridor was so strong it burned my nostrils. The cold fluorescent lights overhead washed out everyone's face, turning them a sickly, pale white. I, Evelyn Reed, was still in my sweatpants and an old t-shirt having hastily thrown on a down parka. I was even wearing slippers as I sprinted here. My heart felt like it was about to hammer its way out of my chest. Just half an hour ago, I'd received a call from the state police. My husband, Jonathan Reed, had been speeding late at night on the road to a luxury suburban community and crashed into a guardrail. The car was severely mangled, and he was trapped inside his life hanging by a thread. He was now in the ICU at Lakeshore General Hospital. The world spun. Car accident. ICU. The words struck my mind like sledgehammers. We had just spoken on the phone earlier in the evening. He said he was working late at the office and told me to go to bed early. Why was he on a road heading out to the suburbs? That gated community was a place that people like us with our middle-class salaries rarely set foot in. I trembled all over my mind, a chaotic mess. The only thought was, Jonathan, you have to be okay. 10 years of marriage, from having nothing to finally gaining a foothold in this city, selling our old place for a new car. Though we didn't have children yet, life was getting better every day. How could he just fall like this? I burst into the hospital, found the ICU floor. The light above the emergency room door was still glaringly bright. A uniformed state trooper came over and briefly explained the situation. Then the attending physician approached me, his face grim. "Are you Jonathan Reed's family? I'm his wife." "Doctor, how is he? What's happening?" I grabbed the doctor's arm, my voice trembling so much I could barely form words. The doctor adjusted his glasses, his tone heavy with professional gravity. "The situation is not optimistic. Severe traumatic brain injury, multiple fractured ribs, pulmonary contusion, and signs of a ruptured liver and spleen. He's lost a significant amount of blood. We are doing everything we can, but I need you to prepare yourself." "Prepare myself." "Prepare for what?" "For him to die." No, I couldn't accept that. "Doctor, I'm begging you, save him. Whatever it costs, you have to save him." Tears streamed down my face like a broken dam. I nearly fell to my knees. After 10 years together, he was a part of my very being, the closest person to me in the entire world. "We will do our best. Right now, we need you to sign the consent forms for surgery. We need to perform an emergency craniotomy, a very high-risk procedure to remove the hematoma in his brain and relieve the intracranial pressure." The doctor handed me a clipboard with a stack of papers filled with dense clauses and risk warnings that looked like death warrants. My hand shook so violently I could hardly hold the pen. That heavy pen seemed to carry the weight of Jonathan's life and death. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to be calm. The trembling pen tip was just about to touch the signature line for next of kin. "Hold on. Mrs. Reed, please wait a moment." A hurried yet rigid voice cut through the air. I looked up to see a middle-aged man in a dark suit carrying a briefcase, his hair meticulously combed, striding toward me. He looked like a lawyer, but I didn't recognize him. "You are?" I asked, confused, a sense of foreboding rising in my chest. Why would a lawyer show up at a time like this? "Good evening, Mrs. Reed. My name is Davies, and I am Mr. Jonathan Reed's personal legal counsel." The man produced a file from his briefcase, his tone so calm it was almost cold. "Before his accident, Mr. Reed executed a will at my office, which has been notarized. According to the emergency clause in the will, in the event he is in critical condition involving major medical decisions and asset arrangements, I am required to immediately read the relevant portions to you." Personal legal counsel A. Will. I was completely stunned. Since when did Jonathan have a personal attorney? He had never mentioned it to me. The most legal help we ever got was hiring a lawyer when we bought our condo. Where did this personal counsel come from? And why would he make a will? We were so young. "Mr. Davies, this is a critical moment for my husband's life. Can't this wait until after the surgery?" I tried to suppress the panic and anger in my heart, struggling to remain rational. Mr. Davies shook his head, his expression unchanging. "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Reed, but according to Mr. Reed's explicit instructions, I must inform you at this time. This pertains to important subsequent arrangements." He paused, opened the so-called will, and read in a clear, cold voice, "I, Jonathan Reed, do solemnly declare that in the event of my unforeseen death, all assets under my name, including but not limited to bank deposits, stocks, mutual funds, the condominium at Lincoln Park, and all shares and profits in Innovatech Solutions LLC, shall be unconditionally bequeathed to Miss Caitlin Monroe. Time seemed to freeze at that moment. The bustling sounds of the hallway, the footsteps of doctors and nurses, the beeping of machines, it all vanished. In my ears there was only the emotionless voice of the lawyer and that poison-laced name, Caitlin Monroe. Caitlin Monroe. Caitlin Monroe. I remembered. The young, beautiful, and ambitious intern who had joined Jonathan's company 6 months ago. I had met her once when I dropped off some documents he had forgotten at home. The way she looked at Jonathan then had made me uncomfortable. I had even half-jokingly asked him about it. He had sworn up and down, "Honey, you're overthinking it. She's just a kid. She's good at her job, that's all. It's purely a supervisor appreciating a subordinate. Appreciating her so much that he wanted to give her his entire fortune, unconditionally bequeathed. So, what did our 10-year marriage count for? I was with him when we started in a tiny walk-up apartment, supported him through his startup. When he was at his lowest, I took out all my personal savings to help him survive. I managed our home, took care of his bedridden mother until her last day. Were all of those years worth less than a Caitlin Monroe he had known for less than 6 months? The immense shock, the betrayal, the rage, the despair, it all came crashing down on me like a tsunami. My body went cold, my blood felt like it was turning to ice. The tears I had just shed for his injuries now seemed utterly ridiculous. I looked toward the closed door of the emergency room. The person lying inside was no longer my husband, the man I had shared everything with. He was a monster who had planned everything, meticulously delivering a fatal blow to me, even from the brink of death. Why was he driving to that suburban community late at night? Was he going to meet Caitlin? This will was his promise, his guarantee to that woman. And what about me? What was I, Evelyn Reed, in Jonathan Reed's grand plan? A loyal wife to be used and then discarded. A pathetic joke who would lose everything. Mrs. Reed, Mr. Davies's voice pulled me back to reality. He seemed to be observing my reaction. Are you all right? This is a legally binding document. Furthermore, regarding the medical expenses, since Mr. Reed's assets have a designated beneficiary, the enormous medical bills that may arise will need to be covered by you. Covered by me. By me. The legal wife who was about to be kicked out. With nothing, I was supposed to bear the medical costs that could bankrupt me for a man who had already given everything away. What a brilliant calculation. Jonathan, you are cruel to the extreme. The doctor was growing impatient beside me. Ma'am, we need a decision. The surgery cannot wait. I slowly lifted my head. The tear tracks on my face had dried, but my eyes had completely changed. The grief, panic, and pleading from moments ago were gone, replaced by a chilling calm that bordered on madness. I looked at the doctor, then at the heartless will, and finally my gaze fell upon the pen in my hand, the pen that had almost signed away my last shred of dignity. 10 years of sacrifice in exchange for a complete betrayal and death. Fine, Jonathan. You were ruthless, so don't blame me, Evelyn, for being unmerciful. You want to use my pain and my kindness to secure a future for you and your little mistress. Dream on. Under the astonished gazes of the doctor and Mr. Davies, I slowly but with absolute firmness threw the heavy pen to the floor. Clack. The sharp sound echoed piercingly in the quiet hallway. I met the doctor's bewildered eyes, a cold, sharp curve forming on my lips. My voice was clear and decisive, without a hint of hesitation. Doctor, forget it. Don't resuscitate. I paused, then added a single chilling sentence. Send him straight to the crematorium. The sound of high heels clacking on the hospital floor behind me was absent. I was in slippers, my steps nearly silent, but each one felt like walking on a blade, bone-chillingly cold yet strangely clear-headed. Behind me, a dead silence followed by muffled gasps and disbelieving whispers. I could imagine the professional mask cracking on Mr. Davies's face. The doctors and nurses exchanging stunned glances. A wife who was just moments ago weeping and begging them to save her husband at all costs, had in an instant calmly declared she was giving up on resuscitation, even demanding he be sent directly to the crematorium. In their eyes, I must have been insane or evil to the core. But I wasn't insane. I was just completely awakened by a cold piece of paper and the name Caitlin Monroe. A 10-year marriage, a meticulously woven lie, was torn to shreds by Jonathan's own hand at the end of his life. He didn't just want my love to be buried with him. He wanted to steal everything I was entitled to and offer it to his new love. If that was the case, why should I shed another tear for him? Why should I bear medical bills that could bankrupt me to save an empty shell whose heart no longer belonged to me? Why should I play along with his final act of a deeply loving couple? I reached the elevator. The cold metal doors reflected my pale but unnervingly calm face. My eyes were still red, but they held no more tears, only the ashes of a love that had burned out. And beneath those ashes, a cold determination was silently taking root. Ding. The elevator doors opened. It was empty. I stepped inside, pressed the button for the ground floor. The doors slid shut, sealing off the chaos and astonishment behind me. In the small, confined space, there was only the sound of my own breathing. The forced composure I had maintained finally allowed a crack to appear. My body began to tremble uncontrollably, not from grief, but from utter rage and the fear that came with knowing the truth. What if I had learned about this will just a little later? What if I had signed the papers, given everything, even gone into debt to save him? What then? Watch him recover, perhaps with a flicker of guilt, only to turn around and take everything that was rightfully ours and run off with. Caitlin Monroe and I, aside from the hollow title of a devoted wife, would be left with a mountain of debt and a shattered heart. That would have been true hell on earth. Jonathan, you didn't just betray our marriage. You wanted to push me into an abyss from which I could never recover. You were so cruel. The elevator reached the ground floor. The hospital lobby was brightly lit, but it was early morning, and the crowd had thinned. A cold draft blew in from the main entrance, chilling me in my thin pajamas and parka. I shivered, but the cold only made my mind clearer. I took out my phone. The lock screen was still a photo of us on vacation last year. He had his arm around me, his smile brilliant. We looked so perfect together. Ironic. What a massive irony. My stiff fingers navigated the screen. The first thing I did wasn't to call anyone, but to open the voice recording app. I confirmed that since the call from the state trooper, all my calls and conversations had been recorded. It was a habit of mine to record important calls. I never thought it would be useful like this. Then I scrolled through my contacts, skipping over relatives who would likely tell me to calm down and think of the bigger picture. I dialed one number directly. It was my best friend, Jessica Chen. She was a lawyer specializing in divorce cases, a tough woman who was fiercely loyal. She was the only person I could completely trust right now, the only one who could give me practical help. The phone was answered almost immediately. Evelyn, what's wrong? It's so late. Jessica's voice was groggy but alert. Jessica, I started, my voice hoarse but steady. Jonathan was in a car accident. He's in the ICU at Lakeshore General. What Jessica was instantly awake. Is it serious? Are you at the hospital? Don't panic, I'm on my way. Don't come, I interrupted, my tone so cold it surprised even me. He's dead. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. How Evelyn are you? Okay, I'm perfectly fine. I walked out of the hospital entrance, standing on the deserted street as the cold wind howled, watching the occasional car speed by. Jessica, listen to me. The point isn't that he's dead. The point is that before he died, he made a will. I took a deep breath and spelled it out for her. All of his assets, the condo, his savings, his company shares, everything is being given to a woman named Caitlin Monroe. The other end of the line fell into a dead silence for a good 10 seconds, then erupted with Jessica's incredulous, furious roar. That son of a bitch, Jonathan Caitlin Monroe. Isn't that the flirtatious little intern at his company? Holy hell, is he even human? 10 years of marriage, and he pulls this. Evelyn, this has to be fake. Are you sure? A lawyer named Davies showed up with a notarized will. Read it out loud to everyone right as I was about to sign the surgery consent forms, I said coldly. I'm 100% sure. The bastard. Scumbag. Jessica's voice was shaking with anger. So, what are you going to do? You're not just going to take this, are you? Absolutely not. There's something wrong here. You're his wife. You have legal inheritance rights. This will infringes on your rights. We can sue to have it invalidated. I know my voice remained calm. That's why I refused resuscitation and walked out. Jessica went silent again. This time, it was a silence of shock. After a long moment, she asked cautiously, You refused resuscitation. The moment the doctor asked me to sign, I threw the pen down. I told them to stop treatment and send him straight to the crematorium. I repeated my words, feeling no remorse, only a twisted sense of satisfaction. Good for you, Jessica practically shouted, her voice filled with righteous glee. For that kind of heartless bastard, why save him so he can live and spend your money with his little tramp? Evelyn, you did the right thing. The absolute right thing. I support you. We are going to win this case. I'll fight it for you. We'll fight them to the death. If I don't take that little homewrecker to the cleaners, my name isn't Jessica Chen. My best friend's unwavering support was like a warm current chasing away some of the bone-deep chill. I knew I wasn't fighting alone. Jessica, I need your help, I said quickly. First, even though the will is notarized, there have to be loopholes. Was Jonathan of sound mind when he made it? Was he coerced or deceived? Especially did he know this would completely strip me of my inheritance rights. This relates to the issue of spousal elective share. Second, I need you to investigate the relationship between Jonathan and Caitlin. How far did it go? Were there any large financial transactions between them? Any joint assets? Third, help me secure our condo and my personal assets. I'm afraid they'll make a move soon. Don't worry, leave it to me. Jessica's voice was firm as steel. I'll start gathering evidence immediately. You go home first. Don't go anywhere else. Don't answer any calls, especially from Jonathan's self-righteous family. We'll meet tomorrow morning and talk. Protect yourself. Lock your doors. Okay. I hung up, standing on the deserted street corner in the pre-dawn light. I pulled my thin coat tighter around me. The city was still glittering with neon lights, but none of it could illuminate the ice and darkness in my heart. But this time, in the darkness, a flame of vengeance had been ignited. I didn't hail a cab home right away. I walked to a 4-hour CVS near the hospital, bought the hottest coffee they had, and sat down at a window seat. I needed some time alone to process this earth-shattering change. I sipped the coffee, my fingers tracing the warm paper cup, watching the few passers-by hurry past the window. A few hours ago, I was an ordinary woman in a seemingly happy marriage, worrying if my husband was working too hard planning tomorrow's meals. A few hours later, my world had collapsed. My husband had betrayed me and died, and I had become a widow, one who would probably be seen by the world as cold-blooded and vicious. It didn't matter. Other people's opinions had never mattered. What mattered was getting back everything that belonged to me and making the people who deserved it pay the price. I opened my banking app. I checked the joint account Jonathan and I shared. Sure enough, more than half of the substantial sum was gone, transferred out, leaving only a small amount. They worked fast. I then tried to log into the brokerage account Jonathan had told me he used for company cash flow. Password incorrect. It seemed he had been preparing for this for a long time. Fortunately, I still had my own separate account. It held my savings from years of working and my own investments, plus the inheritance my mother left me. I had always managed this money independently. Jonathan knew about it but never interfered. This was my only safety net. Then I thought of that lawyer, Davies. His professional, seemingly neutral attitude was nauseatingly biased. He was definitely Caitlin's man, or rather the man Jonathan had arranged for Caitlin. And what about Jonathan's company, Innovatech Solutions LLC? I knew about it. Though I never participated in its operations, Jonathan would occasionally tell me about its status. It wasn't a huge company, but its performance had been quite good in recent years. He was leaving his company shares to Caitlin too. Had that woman already infiltrated the company, suspicions coiled around me like venomous snakes. But the more I thought, the calmer I became. Anger wouldn't solve anything. Only absolute calm and a meticulous plan could win the coming war. The sky began to lighten. A new day was beginning, but for me, Evelyn Reed, my old life was over. A war without smoke or fire had just begun. I finished the last slightly cooled sip of coffee, stood up and hailed a taxi. The Grandview Residences on Clark Street, I said. That was the home that was in name mine and Jonathan's, but from today it was just one of my battlefields. Sitting in the cab, watching the streetscape blur past the window, I thought to myself, Jonathan, rest in peace. I'll clean up the mess you left behind. Caitlin and that Mr. Davies, let's play this out slowly. The taxi stopped in front of the residential building. I paid and got out. As I approached the entrance, I saw a familiar figure pacing anxiously. It was my mother-in-law, Jonathan's mother, Helen Reed. How did she get here so fast? The news traveled quickly. Seeing her demeanor, I guessed she wasn't here to comfort her newly widowed daughter-in-law. Helen was standing by the entrance wearing a shabby quilted coat, her hair a mess. Her face was a mixture of anxiety, grief, and a familiar look of disapproval directed at me. Next to her was another middle-aged woman from the building. A notorious gossip. It seemed the news hadn't just traveled fast. It had brought reinforcements. I sneered internally but kept my face impassive. Fine. Since we're here, let the first battle begin. Evelyn, you're back. Helen rushed over as soon as she saw me grabbing my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging into my flesh. Where's Jonathan? How is he? The hospital called and said he's gone. Is it true? Tell me. Her voice was thick with sobs, tears instantly streaking her face. Normally I might have felt a pang of sympathy might have comforted her. But now looking at her theatrical grief, all I could see was Caitlin Monroe's name on Jonathan's will, and all I could hear were Helen's years of complaints about me being infertile, unable to give her a grandson. Who knew if she had known about Caitlin all along, maybe even looked forward to it? I gently but firmly removed her hand, my voice as calm as if I were discussing the weather. Helen, you already know, don't you? He's gone. They couldn't save him in the ICU. Why not? Why couldn't they save him? Helen's voice shot up, laced with accusation. The doctor said they were trying to save him. How could he just be gone? Did you not sign the papers? Did you stop the doctors from saving him? Just as I expected. She was here to condemn me. The gossip monger chimed in, her shifty eyes sizing me up. That's right, Evelyn. This is a serious matter. Jonathan was so young. The hospital would have done everything they could. As his wife, you can't be foolish at a time like this. I looked at them and felt a wave of sadness followed by a surge of ridicule. Jonathan wasn't even cold yet, and what they cared about wasn't why he was driving to a suburban mansion in the middle of the night, not the bizarre will, but whether I had done my best to save him. Helen, I softened my voice, adopting a tone of exhaustion and grief. The doctor said there was little hope. Less than a 10% chance of survival. Even if he was saved, he would likely be in a vegetative state. And the craniotomy was extremely high risk, and the cost would have been a bottomless pit. I paused deliberately, watching their reactions. Helen's eyes flickered. The neighbor pursed her lips. Money was always their most sensitive topic. So you just gave up. You just watched my son die. Helen started wailing again. Oh, Jonathan, my poor boy. You died such a wrongful death, marrying such a heartless wife who wouldn't even save you. Some early rising neighbors had been drawn out by the commotion, poking their heads out of their doors. This was exactly what they wanted, to use public opinion to pressure me. I took a deep breath, deciding to stop beating around the bush and drop the bomb. Better they hear it from me than a twisted version from someone else. Helen, I cut through her crying, my voice not loud but clear enough for everyone to hear. Don't be so quick to blame me. Do you know why Jonathan was out near that gated community in the middle of the night? Do you know what he did before the accident? Helen's wailing stopped abruptly. She exchanged a confused and slightly guilty look with her friend. Wasn't he working late? Working late. A bitter smile, uglier than tears, spread across my face. Does working late require making a will? A will? What will? Helen was stunned. Right as I was about to sign for the surgery, a lawyer named Davies showed up. I said slowly, each word like a shard of ice. He held up a notarized will from Jonathan and announced in front of everyone that all of Jonathan Reed's assets, this condo, were standing in front of his savings. His company shares everything, without a single penny left for us, was to be given to a woman named Caitlin Monroe. The air instantly froze. Helen's jaw dropped, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The grief on her face was replaced by utter horror. The gossip monger gasped instinctively, taking half a step back. Who is Caitlin Monroe? Helen's voice was dry. Who? I sneered. She's the pretty young intern at his company. You've probably heard of her. Jonathan betrayed this family a long time ago. He wasn't just keeping a woman on the side. Before he died, he used the cruelest method to kick you and me out of our home. I deliberately emphasized you and me. Helen might have been unhappy with me, but when it came to her own interests, especially her son's inheritance, she wouldn't be foolish. Impossible, Jonathan wouldn't do that. Helen shook her head violently, her face deathly pale. It must be a mistake from that lawyer, or that vixen tricked him. Evelyn, this isn't true, it can't be. It's in black and white, notarized. Mr. Davies read it out himself. Many doctors and nurses heard it. I mercilessly shattered her delusion. Helen, the issue now isn't why I gave up on saving him. It's how we're going to keep this home. Jonathan didn't just wrong me. He wronged you. The mother who worked so hard to raise him. He wanted to give everything to an outsider. What about you? You're old. What will you do? Are you going to rely on that Caitlin Monroe to take care of you in your old age? I had hit Helen's deepest fear, her retirement. She had always relied on her son. Now that he was gone and his inheritance was about to vanish, she panicked. That ungrateful, God-forsaken boy, how could he, how dare he? Helen's anger immediately shifted to her dead son. She beat her chest and stomped her feet this time with genuine outrage and fear. That vixen! It must be that vixen who put him up to it. Evelyn, we can't let her get away with this. The neighbor quickly chimed in. That's right, Helen, this can't be legal. You're his mother. You have a right to inherit. Evelyn is his wife. She gets a share too. How can he give it all to an outsider? You have to sue that witch. Seeing them instantly united against a common enemy, I laughed coldly. Inside. People. So pragmatic. One moment they were accusing me of being heartless. The next, as soon as their own interests were threatened, they turned their guns. We will definitely sue, I said, going with the flow, my tone firm. But we need evidence, and we need time. Right now, the most important thing is to stabilize the situation. Helen, don't get agitated, and don't go spreading this around. The fewer people who know, the better. We don't want to tip them off. Let's go inside and discuss this. I took out my key fob and swiped open the building door. Helen, now completely lost, followed me meekly. Her gossip friend tried to follow, but I stopped her with a look. Ma'am, our home is in chaos right now. It's not a good time for guests. I hope you can keep what you heard today confidential. My tone was polite, but unmistakably distant. The woman gave a forced smile, her eyes full of regret at not getting more drama, but nodded and left. Inside the elevator, it was just me and Helen. She seemed to still be in shock, muttering things like, "What a sin, and that witch will burn in hell." I looked at my own pale, sharp-eyed reflection in the elevator wall, and at my mother-in-law, who seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant. I felt no sympathy, only cold calculation. Very good. Round 1 was a success. I had pulled my mother-in-law onto my side of the battlefield. At least in dealing with Caitlin, she would be a temporary asset, not an obstacle. This would save me a lot of trouble. But I knew this temporary alliance was incredibly fragile. Helen only cared about her share of the inheritance. The moment our interests clashed, she could turn on me at any time. Furthermore, Caitlin and Mr. Davies would not just sit back and do nothing. The war had only just begun. Returning to the place once called home, what awaited me was not warmth but the thicker smoke of battle. The elevator doors opened. I walked toward the familiar apartment door. The moment the key slid into the lock, I could almost hear the gears of fate turning. Click. The door opened. The apartment was still filled with the breath of life. Our wedding photos still hung on the wall, but everything had changed. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me, temporarily shutting out the outside world. I turned to look at Helen, still lost in anger and fear. My voice was calm but held an undeniable power. From now on, I'm in charge of this home. If you want to get what you deserve, you will do everything I say. The heavy apartment door clicked shut behind me, locking out the world. The familiar furniture, the lingering scent of the lavender diffuser I'd used last night, everything seemed normal, yet it was all shrouded in a cold, deathly stillness. Helen collapsed onto the living room sofa and started weeping again, this time a mixture of genuine fear and rage at her son's betrayal. That heartless boy, I raised him, and he gives all our money to some tramp. He wants to kill us both. I ignored her lamentations. This was no time for sympathy. In a fight to the death, compassion was the most useless commodity. I needed calm. I needed to think. And most of all, I needed to act. Helen, I cut her off, my voice low but firm. Crying won't solve anything. If you still want to get the retirement money you're owed, you need to pull yourself together. Now. Helen's sobs subsided. She looked up at me, with swollen red eyes. Then, what do? We hire a lawyer and sue that witch. I've already contacted a lawyer. My best friend Jessica Chen. She specializes in divorce and inheritance cases. She's very reliable. As I spoke, I took off my parka, revealing the sweatpants underneath. Running around the hospital and the street dressed like this, I only now felt a wave of cold and dishevelment. But before the lawyers get involved, we need to clarify a few things. I walked to the living room window and yanked open the heavy curtains. Pale morning light flooded in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and casting a stark light on the home that once felt warm but now seemed hollow. When was the last time you saw Jonathan? Did he seem unusual in any way? I began my interrogation like a cold detective. As his mother, she might have noticed small details. Helen paused, trying to recall. Last week, Wednesday, he came to visit, brought some fruit. He seemed normal, just said the company was busy. Oh wait, she suddenly remembered something. He took a phone call. Went out on the balcony, was all secretive about it. When he came back in, he looked off. I asked who it was. He said it was a client. A client, huh? More like Caitlin Monroe, I thought grimly. Anything else? Did he mention any new investment projects or a sudden need for a large sum of money? I pressed on. A will was the result, but what was the process? Jonathan's transfer of assets had to have a reason, a cover story. Helen frowned and shook her head. Not really, but about 2 months ago, he mentioned something about the company expanding and cash flow being tight. He asked if I had any spare cash. I told him I couldn't touch my retirement money, so he dropped it. Cash flow. A convenient excuse to move money out to set aside a nest egg for Caitlin. I could practically piece together the whole story. Under the guise of company expansion, Jonathan gradually moved our marital assets, then created a will to ensure that after his death, all that money would legally fall into Caitlin's hands. What a brilliant scheme. He'd even considered hitting up his own mother. My heart grew colder. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a long, premeditated conspiracy. Helen, you sit here for a bit. Have some water. I'm going to change and see if I can find anything in the bedroom. I offered a small comfort to my disoriented mother-in-law and headed for our bedroom. The king-sized bed we had shared for years was an eyesore. I suppressed a wave of nausea and anger, walked past it, and opened the drawer of Jonathan's nightstand. It was a mess, some loose change receipts, an old watch, charging cables. I patiently sifted through it all. Our marriage certificate and other important documents were always kept by me in the safe in the study. I rarely went through Jonathan's personal things, giving him his space and respect. Looking back, that respect was a complete joke. At the bottom of the drawer, my fingers touched something hard like a flash drive. I pulled it out. It was a sleek silver thumb drive. This wasn't the one he usually used for work. A thought flickered in my mind. I clutched it in my palm and continued searching. Nothing else of importance. I moved to the closet, checking the pockets of his jackets. Most were empty, but inside a suit he rarely wore, I felt a folded piece of paper. I opened it. It was a temporary access card for a high-end gated community in the suburbs, valid until the end of the month. The date was recent, and the name of the community was the same one the state trooper had mentioned. My fingers tightened, my nails digging into my palm. He really did have a place there. A love nest for him and Caitlin. A violent wave of nausea rose in my throat. I ran to the bathroom and dry heaved, but nothing came up, only a cold hatred coursing through my veins. Calm down, Evelyn. You have to stay calm. This is just circumstantial evidence. It's not enough. I splashed cold water on my face, looking at the pale woman with burning eyes in the mirror. I took a deep breath and returned to the bedroom. I put the thumb drive and the access card away safely, then headed for the study. The study was where Jonathan spent most of his time, the most likely place to find clues. His desk was neat. The laptop was gone, probably at the office or somewhere else he had prepared for Caitlin. I pulled open the drawers. They were filled with company documents, contracts, invoices. I scanned through them quickly. Most were normal business dealings, but a draft of a share transfer agreement caught my eye. The transferor was Jonathan Reed. The transferee's name was left blank. The object of the transfer was 10% of the shares of Innovatech Solutions LLC. The date was 1 month ago. 10%. He was indeed secretly transferring company assets. Was the blank name for Caitlin? I quickly took a photo of the draft with my phone. This was crucial evidence. Next, my attention was drawn to a small, fireproof safe with a key lock in the corner of the desk. I knew this safe. Jonathan said he kept some important personal items in it. He kept the key. I had never thought to open it. Now I had to. I went back to the bedroom and rummaged through Jonathan's drawers again. Finally, in an old wallet box, I found a small, inconspicuous key. Worth a try. My heart pounded as I returned to the study, inserted the key into the lock and turned. Click. It opened. I took a deep breath and opened the safe door. There wasn't much inside. A stack of cash, maybe a few $1,000s, and several property deeds. I quickly looked through them. Besides the condo we lived in, there was another deed for a small condo in that same suburban community. The owner was clearly listed as Jonathan Reed. The purchase date was 6 months ago, right after Caitlin appeared. Good. Very good, Jonathan. You dared to buy another home behind my back. Under the deeds was a file folder. I opened it. Inside were 2 copies of a will. One was from several years ago, leaving his assets to me and his mother with clear divisions. The other was the notarized copy of the most recent will Mr. Davies had read bequeathing everything to Caitlin Monroe. The date was 3 months ago. Besides the wills, the folder contained several photographs. They were intimate pictures of Jonathan and Caitlin. Some were from an overseas trip. Others were taken inside that suburban condo. In the photos, Caitlin was smiling brightly, nestled in Jonathan's arms. The look in his eyes, full of a tenderness and adoration I hadn't seen in years, was directed at her. And then there was a sonogram report. The date was 2 months ago. The result showed an early-stage pregnancy. Boom. It was like a lightning bolt exploded in my head. Caitlin was pregnant. Jonathan hadn't just cheated. He had gotten his mistress pregnant. That's why he was in such a hurry to make a new will. To leave everything to her to secure the future for her and their child. So, that was it. That was it. All the clues came together at this moment, forming a complete and utterly vicious betrayal. No wonder he was so heartless. No wonder the will left no room for negotiation. The shock was so great that my vision went black. I had to lean on the desk to keep from collapsing. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, the pain making it hard to breathe. But what followed was a hatred and determination 10 times stronger than before. Jonathan, you didn't just betray me. You wanted to use your child with her to completely rob me of everything. You died, but you wanted to leave behind an illegitimate child to inherit what was rightfully ours. In your dreams, you will not succeed. I stared at the sonogram, my knuckles white from the force of my grip. A fire of rage burned in my chest, almost consuming me. But the last shred of my sanity reminded me the angrier I got, the calmer I needed to be. This evidence was too important. The thumb drive, the access card, the share transfer draft, the condo deed, the old and new wills, the intimate photos, the sonogram. These were all sharp blades pointed at Caitlin and Mr. Davies. I quickly gathered everything from the safe, along with the thumb drive and access card, and put them into a sturdy canvas tote bag. Then, I restored the safe to its original state and locked it. After all this, I walked out of the study, my face calm, but a storm was raging in my eyes. Helen was still on the sofa, looking at me anxiously. Evelyn, did you find anything? I looked at this old woman who had also been plotted against by her own son. I felt no sympathy, only a sense of utility. She couldn't know about the pregnancy yet. With her desperate desire for a grandchild, it would only create complications. I found some clues about Jonathan transferring assets, I said vaguely. It's not safe here anymore. Caitlin and her lawyer will probably make a move soon. You should go back to your own place for now. Don't come here, and don't answer any strange calls, especially from that lawyer Davies. Wait for my news. Helen was now completely subservient to me, nodding hastily. Okay, I'll listen to you. You have to find a way to get the money back. I gave a non-committal hum and saw her to the door. After closing the door, the world was finally quiet. I leaned against the cold steel, sliding down to the floor. An immense fatigue and the emptiness of surviving a catastrophe washed over me. But my hand still clutched the canvas bag full of evidence. Finally, the tears I had been holding back began to fall. Not for Jonathan, but for the 10 years of my youth wasted on the wrong person for this bone-chilling betrayal. After sending my distraught mother-in-law on her way the moment the door closed, the silence in the apartment was nearly suffocating. I sagged against the door, sinking to the floor, clutching the canvas bag of damning evidence. It was like holding onto a life raft, and also like holding a ticking bomb. Silent tears streamed down my face, not from grief, but from an all-consuming rage and the hollow exhaustion that followed. 10 years of marriage, it turned out, was a joke from the very beginning. Worse than a joke, it was a meticulously planned robbery. Jonathan had spent 10 years weaving a gentle trap for me, and at my most unguarded moment, he bared his poisoned fangs. He didn't just want my life. He wanted to suck my last drop of blood. Caitlin was pregnant. That fact was a venomous thorn lodged deep in my heart. Every beat brought a sharp stabbing pain and intense humiliation. They didn't just betray me. They wanted to use a new life to solidify their spoils, to mock my failure and inadequacy. No, I would absolutely not let them succeed. I fiercely wiped away my tears with the back of my hand, my gaze hardening like steel. Crying was for the weak. From the moment I decided to refuse resuscitation for Jonathan, I had stepped onto an irreversible path of vengeance. I could not afford to be weak. I stood up and went to the living room window, pulling back a corner of the curtain to warily check the street below. No suspicious cars or people. But I knew this calm was just a facade. Caitlin and Mr. Davies would not sit idly by. They were probably already making their move. The most urgent task was to meet with Jessica immediately, hand over the evidence, and map out a detailed battle plan. I took out my phone and called Jessica again. "Jessica, are you out yet? Just about to leave. What's up? How are things at home? Did your mother-in-law give you a hard time?" The sound of a car door closing and an engine starting came through the phone. "She's temporarily under control, an ally for now," I said succinctly. "But I found something much more important. It's not safe to talk on the phone. Let's meet at the usual place. As soon as possible." I gave her the address of a quiet private cafe we frequented with booths suitable for discussion. "Okay, I'll be there in half an hour." Jessica heard the gravity in my voice and agreed without another word. After hanging up, I quickly went to the bedroom, changed out of my ridiculous sweatpants and parka, and put on a sleek black turtleneck and dark jeans. I topped it with a long camel-colored wool coat. Facing the mirror, I carefully combed my hair and applied light makeup to cover my pallor and tear stains. The woman in the mirror had calm eyes and a stern expression projecting an air of, "Do not approach." Good. This was the face I needed to show the world from now on. An impeccable warrior, not a pitiful abandoned wife. I double-checked all the evidence in the canvas bag, taking clear photos of crucial pages like the will sonogram deeds and share draft as a backup. Then I carefully placed the originals in an inconspicuous tote bag. I took the thumb drive with me as well. Grabbing my car keys and purse, I took a deep breath and opened the door. The sunlight outside was a bit glaring. I squinted, held my head high, and walked toward the elevator. On the drive to the cafe, I was unusually alert, occasionally checking my rearview mirror to make sure I wasn't being followed. Jonathan's death and Caitlin's existence felt like an invisible shroud, making me distrust everything around me. At the cafe, I requested a small booth in the back and ordered a pot of strong tea. I forced myself to wait patiently, every minute, stretching into an eternity. My mind was racing, reviewing the known information, speculating on the enemy's possible moves. About 20 minutes later, the booth curtain was pushed aside and Jessica rushed in. She was also dressed in a sharp business suit, her face showing signs of a sleepless night. But her eyes were sharp and full of energy. "Evelyn," she hugged me tightly as she entered, then immediately let go, looking me up and down. "Are you okay? You look so pale." "I'm fine." I motioned for her to sit down and poured her a cup of hot tea. "Look at this first." I didn't waste time on pleasantries, directly opening the tote bag and laying out the evidence one by one on the table. Jessica's expression shifted from worry to shock, and then to utter fury. When she saw the notarized copy of the new will, she cursed that bastard. When she saw the condo deed and the intimate photos, her face turned ashen. When she finally picked up the sonogram report and saw the contents, she slammed her hand on the table, nearly knocking over the teacup. "Holy hell, that son of a bitch, Jonathan Caitlin. This woman is pregnant." Jessica's voice rose in outrage, causing a waiter passing by to glance over. She quickly lowered her voice, but her anger hadn't subsided. No wonder. No wonder that scumbag was so ruthless. He was planning to burn all the bridges. "Evelyn, we absolutely cannot let this go. This is them walking all over us and expecting us to lay down a red carpet." In contrast to Jessica's agitation, I was strangely calm. The initial rage had passed, leaving only cold calculation. Jessica cursing won't solve anything. What we need now is a strategy. "Is this evidence enough to overturn that will?" Jessica took a few deep breaths, forcing herself to calm down and examine the documents with a lawyer's professional eye. "The will itself is notarized, so overturning it on procedural grounds will be difficult," she said, pointing to the document. "But it's not impossible. The key is that this will completely strips you of your spousal inheritance rights. In many states, this violates the elective share statute. Even if the will is valid, you have the right to claim your share." She then picked up the share transfer draft and the condo deed. "These are the key. They prove that Jonathan engaged in hiding, transferring, and dissipating marital assets during the marriage. Under the law, when dividing marital property, the party who hides or transfers assets can be given a smaller share or no share at all. This is our weapon." And this, I pointed to the silver thumb drive. "I found this in his drawer. It's not the one he usually uses." Jessica's eyes lit up. "Quick, let's see what's on it." I took out my laptop and plugged in the drive. There were several files, all with simple, even cryptic names. We opened them one by one. One folder contained a large number of screenshots of chat logs between Jonathan and Caitlin. It seemed Jonathan had a habit of backing things up. The flirtatious and disgusting messages spanned over a year. They explicitly discussed buying the condo, decorating it, and how to transfer assets step by step. There was even a section discussing how to placate me and what to do if they were discovered. The meticulous planning and malicious intent were chilling. Another folder contained scanned copies of several notarized gift agreements, showing that Jonathan had made multiple large transfers to Caitlin's personal account over the past year under the guise of gifts totaling millions of dollars. There was one more folder. Inside was personal information about Caitlin, including her family background, social connections, and even some unsavory history like working in nightclubs and a brief previous marriage. It seemed Jonathan didn't fully trust her either and had kept some leverage. This evidence, it's like a gift-wrapped victory for us, Jessica said, growing more excited as she looked through everything. She snapped the laptop shut and grabbed my hand. Evelyn, this is fantastic. This evidence is incredibly powerful, especially the chat logs and gift agreements. They directly prove Jonathan's malicious transfer of marital assets and his long-term affair with Caitlin. It could even prove the motive for making the will was utterly depraved. We have a very high chance of getting the court to declare the will invalid, or at least win you the vast majority of the assets. Her eyes shone with professional brilliance. Here's what we need to do immediately. First, file for an emergency injunction to freeze all of Jonathan's bank and brokerage accounts. Put a lien on that condo and the one you're living in to prevent Caitlin from transferring any assets. Second, file a civil lawsuit citing Jonathan's malicious transfer of assets and the will's infringement on spousal rights, demanding the will be declared void and the estate be redivided. Third, regarding Caitlin, we can consider suing her for the return of the gifted assets. If we have enough evidence, we might even look into charges of fraud or unjust enrichment. What about Caitlin's pregnancy? I asked calmly. Will it affect the ruling? For example, will the court show her special consideration because the child is Jonathan's? Jessica snorted. The child. First, she has to prove the child is actually Jonathan's. Even if she can, an illegitimate child's inheritance rights come after the spouse and parents. Furthermore, in a situation where the deceased party was at serious fault, maliciously transferring assets, violating marital fidelity, the court will naturally lean toward the innocent party, which is you. The existence of this child won't help her. In fact, it could further prove that Jonathan's motive for the will was impure, to protect his and the third party's interests. This is actually more beneficial for us. Hearing Jessica's professional analysis, the heavy stone in my heart lifted slightly. It seemed the law wasn't entirely on the side of the shameless. Also, Jessica lowered her voice, her eyes sharp. Evelyn, although the police initially ruled Jonathan's death an accident at this critical juncture, we should be careful. Was his late-night drive to that condo really an accident? Is it possible? My heart tightened. You mean... I'm not saying anything, just that it's too much of a coincidence, Jessica waved her hand. In any case, be careful. Caitlin and that lawyer Davies are not to be underestimated. Watch your safety recently. Check the locks on your doors and pay attention to whether anyone is following you. I nodded. Jessica's warning was valid. A cornered animal will bite. Who knew what crazy things that pair would do, Jessica? I'm counting on you for the lawsuit. Just tell me what you need me to do. Don't worry, leave it to me. Jessica patted her chest. I'm going back to the office to prepare the documents right now. I'll file for the asset freeze today. Wait for my news. She paused. Oh, right. I'll take these originals. We need them for submission and potential forensic analysis. I organized all the evidence and handed it to Jessica. Watching her carefully place the documents in her briefcase, I felt like I was no longer fighting alone. After parting with Jessica, I didn't go straight home. I drove to the bank and transferred all the money from my personal account to a card in my mother's name, which I held, ensuring I had enough liquid capital. Then I went to a security company to inquire about upgrading my door locks and installing hidden cameras, scheduling an installation for that afternoon. By the time I finished all this, it was noon. I grabbed a quick bite, my mind still in a state of high tension and excitement. Returning to that cold home, the locksmiths arrived soon after and got to work. Listening to the sound of the drill, I looked at the old lock being replaced and sneered internally. Look, Jonathan, you're dead, and I'm even changing the locks you left behind. You and Caitlin will never set foot in here again. That afternoon, I received 2 calls. One was from the state police, informing me that the accident investigation was complete. It was determined that Jonathan was speeding and was fully at fault. They told me I could come to get the death certificate and handle the funeral arrangements. The other call was from Jessica, her voice triumphant. "Evelyn, it's done. The court has granted our motion to freeze the assets. They've already sent people to freeze the accounts and put liens on the properties." They acted fast. It should catch them completely off guard. Sure enough, it wasn't long before my phone started ringing frantically. The caller ID showed Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies's calls were like a relentless summons flashing on my screen again and again before finally stopping, leaving only a series of increasingly urgent texts. "Mrs. Reed, please call me back. We need to discuss Mr. Reed's estate. Your unilateral request to freeze the assets is unreasonable. Please have it lifted immediately." All nonsense. I looked at the messages with a flicker of amusement. Discuss. What was there to discuss? How much of my own property they would deign to grant me, or how I should accept that trash of a will. I didn't reply to any of them, simply blocking his number. The ball was in my court now. They were the ones who should be worried. Jessica's actions were swift and effective. The court's freeze and lien orders were executed with astonishing efficiency, a testament to her professional competence and connections. Soon I received notifications from the bank confirming the frozen status of Jonathan's main accounts. The property management of the suburban community also called delicately inquiring about the lien on the condo there, hinting that someone related had caused a scene but was stopped by security. I could only imagine Caitlin and Mr. Davies's fury when they found the accounts frozen. They must have thought holding the will meant victory was assured, never expecting my counterattack to be so swift and devastating. My mother-in-law Helen also called, her voice frantic. "Evelyn, I just heard from people in the building that the court put a lien on our condo and Jonathan's other place." "What's going on? Is my money gone too?" "Calm down, Helen. It's just a temporary asset freeze to prevent anyone from moving the money," I explained patiently. "It's a necessary step for the lawsuit to protect our money. Your retirement funds are in your own account. No one can touch them." Helen was half convinced but didn't press further, only repeatedly reminding me that I had to win the case. After dealing with these matters, an unavoidable issue presented itself. Jonathan's funeral. As much as I hated him legally, I was still his wife and one of his legal heirs. At least until the will was overturned. Arranging his funeral was my responsibility, and also a matter of public appearance. I couldn't give anyone ammunition to criticize me as so cold-hearted that I wouldn't even manage my husband's funeral. Moreover, I had a strong feeling that the funeral would be another battlefield. Caitlin and Mr. Davies would not take this lying down. They would likely try to cause trouble at the service, attempting to salvage their position or at least make me miserable. Fine. Let the storm rage. I was just looking for an opportunity to tear their hypocritical masks off in front of everyone. I contacted a funeral home and arranged for the simplest service, a basic viewing room and cremation. I didn't notify many people, just a few necessary relatives and some of the senior staff from Jonathan's company. I didn't want to turn the funeral into a drama, but if someone was determined to make it a battlefield, I was ready to oblige. The memorial service was set for 3 days later. Those 3 days were a whirlwind. Besides working with Jessica to prepare legal documents, I had to suppress my revulsion to sort through Jonathan's belongings and prepare for the service. Every item that carried his scent was like a needle pricking my nerves, but I forced myself to handle it all calmly like an emotionless machine. Jessica managed to dig up more information on Caitlin. As expected, she was no innocent flower. A high school dropout, she had worked in several bars before latching onto Jonathan and pretending to be a pure, naive girl. Mr. Davies was a somewhat known local lawyer who specialized in gray area economic disputes. He had a mixed reputation but was known for being crafty. "Evelyn, I'm going to the service with you," Jessica said, worried. "I'm afraid they'll pull something." "I know," I nodded. "I'm counting on it." On the day of the memorial service, the sky was overcast, with a light drizzle falling as if even the heavens were mourning this farce. I wore a simple black dress, my face pale and makeup free. I wasn't mourning him. I was mourning my own dead love and 10 years of wasted youth. The viewing room was not crowded. My mother-in-law Helen had cried herself nearly faint and was being supported by relatives. A few people from Jonathan's company came. Their expressions varied. Some showed genuine sadness, others unconcealed curiosity. I stood by the casket, accepting condolences from the few guests, my heart an empty, cold cavern. What was meant to come finally came. Halfway through the service, just as the casket was about to be closed, the doors to the room were thrown open. A group of people strode in, shattering the solemn atmosphere. Leading the group was none other than Caitlin Monroe. She was also wearing black, but it was a chic, tailored dress. She carried a designer handbag, her makeup flawless. Though she feigned a sorrowful expression, a glint of triumph and provocation was visible in her eyes. Beside her was the self-righteous Mr. Davies, and behind them 2 burly men in black suits who looked like bodyguards. Their appearance immediately drew everyone's attention. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Helen stopped crying, staring at the vixen with a mixture of shock and fury. I slowly raised my head. Across the room, my eyes met Caitlin's. Hers were filled with unconcealed jealousy, resentment, and the arrogance of a victor. Mr. Davies cleared his throat and stepped forward, speaking loudly. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here on behalf of Miss Caitlin Monroe to pay our respects to Mr. Jonathan Reed. Miss Monroe was the love of Mr. Reed's life, and also the sole heir designated in his will. We strongly protest Mrs. Evelyn Reed's unilateral action of freezing Mr. Reed's estate and will be taking legal action." His voice boomed, intended for everyone in the room to hear. This was a blatant attempt to crash the party, to establish Caitlin's status in front of all our friends and family, and to trample me, the legal wife, underfoot. The crowd gasped. All eyes darted between me and Caitlin. Helen was shaking with rage, pointing at Caitlin and screaming, "You shameless hussy! How dare you show your face here? Get out!" But Caitlin was unfazed. She stepped forward, faced Jonathan's portrait, and began to cry, her performance worthy of an Oscar. "Jonathan, how could you leave me? You promised you would take care of me and our child for the rest of our lives. What are we supposed to do now, our child?" Those 2 words were a bomb dropped in the middle of the room. Even the relatives who had been sympathetic to me now wore expressions of shock and complexity. In the traditional mindset, a child, especially a potential male heir, carried immense weight. Helen was completely stunned, staring at Caitlin's stomach, her eyes wavering. Her initial fury was replaced by a flicker of hesitation and even hope. Mr. Davies struck while the iron was hot. "You all heard her. Miss Monroe is carrying Mr. Reed's child. This is his only bloodline in this world. By love, by reason, and by law, Mr. Reed's estate should be used to ensure this child's future." He turned to me. "Mrs. Evelyn Reed, as the legal wife, not only did you refuse to save your husband, but you also rushed to seize his assets before he was even cold. You won't even spare his unborn child. Don't you have a conscience?" What a brilliant move, twisting the narrative and using moral blackmail. He had painted me as a cruel, cold-hearted, greedy woman who wouldn't even spare an unborn baby, while Caitlin became the sympathetic pregnant widow. Everyone's eyes were on me, filled with doubt, even a hint of fear. I stood there, feeling the gazes from all directions, and laughed coldly inside. Of course they would play this card. Use the child to win sympathy and seize the moral high ground. If I were the old meek Evelyn, I might have been crushed by this move, unable to defend myself. But I wasn't her anymore. I slowly walked to the front of the room, turning to face everyone. My voice was not loud, but it carried an undeniable power that filled the hall. "Mr. Davies, Miss Monroe, are you done with your performance?" Caitlin's face changed. "Evelyn, what do you mean?" "What do I mean?" I sneered, taking out my phone and playing a recording. Mr. Davies's cold voice from the hospital hallway echoed clearly, unconditionally bequeathed to Miss Caitlin Monroe. Then I displayed several photos, the intimate pictures of Jonathan and Caitlin, and a close-up of the sonogram report. I held the phone up for everyone to see. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've all heard it and you've all seen it." My voice remained calm, but it was like a hammer striking everyone's heart. When my husband, Jonathan Reed, was in critical condition as I was about to sign the papers to save him at any cost, this Mr. Davies showed up with my husband's notarized will, telling me Jonathan was leaving everything to this Miss Monroe. And this Miss Monroe, my eyes shot toward her like daggers, is pregnant. But I have a question. A man who, while legally married, maintains a long-term illicit relationship with another woman, maliciously transfers marital assets, and even makes a will, leaving his entire fortune to the third party, is the child he leaves behind really a tool for sympathy and inheritance? As for me, refusing to save him. My voice rose with infinite sarcasm when I learned that my 10 years of devotion were exchanged for such a thorough betrayal and calculation. When I knew that saving him would only lead to him and Miss Monroe taking my money and running away, I ask all of you, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you continue to be the fool who gets sold and still helps the seller count the money? My words were coherent and devastating. Exposing Jonathan's betrayal, Caitlin's shamelessness, and Mr. Davies's complicity for all to see. The guests who had been swayed by Caitlin's fatherless child act now looked at them differently. Sympathy and doubt were replaced by shock, contempt, and understanding for my situation. Helen, too, came to her senses, realizing she had almost been fooled by the prospect of a grandchild. Her face flushed with rage. She pointed at Caitlin and screamed, "You lying witch! You'll all burn in hell!" Caitlin's face was ashen. She trembled, pointing at me. "You're lying, you're slandering me. Jonathan loved me. He gave me those assets willingly." Mr. Davies rushed forward. "Mrs. Reed, watch your words. This is defamation. We have a notarized will." "A notarized will?" I scoffed. "Mr. Davies, don't forget, we also have evidence of Jonathan's malicious transfer of assets, chat logs of him and Miss Monroe plotting against me. I will present all of this in court for everyone to see. Let's see who the law protects." My sharp gaze fell on both of them. "And as for this so-called sole heir, Miss Monroe, whether the child in your womb is actually Jonathan's, I'm afraid that will require a scientific test, wouldn't it? After all, with your colorful past, who knows who the father is?" That last line hit Caitlin's sore spot. She shrieked and lunged at me, only to be held back by her bodyguards. The scene descended into chaos. The carefully planned drama by Caitlin and Mr. Davies had turned into a public spectacle of their own humiliation. I looked at their pathetic state, feeling no pleasure, only a bleak emptiness. This farce had desecrated the solemnity of death and completely shattered my last illusions about human nature. I turned away from them and spoke calmly to the funeral home staff. "Please close the casket and proceed with the cremation." The storm at the funeral home ripped away the final veil, exposing the conflict between me, Caitlin, and Mr. Davies in the starkest light. In the end, I didn't collect Jonathan's ashes. I left them for the funeral home to handle as unclaimed. I had done my part, or rather, I couldn't be bothered to even feign the final rituals. After that drama, my reputation in our small circle was likely ruined. Cold, calculating, ruthless, I didn't care. Living by the judgment of others is for cowards. The only thing I needed to do now was win this war and take back everything that was mine. Jessica's legal proceedings moved at lightning speed. The effect of the asset freeze became apparent. All known bank and brokerage accounts in Jonathan's name were frozen. The suburban condo was sealed with a court order. This effectively cut off Caitlin's financial supply and her path to enjoying her supposed victory. Sure enough, it wasn't long before I was bombarded with calls and texts from various unknown numbers. The tone shifted from initial threats, "Evelyn, drop the lawsuit now, or you'll regret it," to feigned reason, "We can sit down and talk. Why must we both be destroyed?" And finally to a kind of resentful begging, "Caitlin is pregnant, she needs money for prenatal care. You can't be so heartless." I looked at those messages with no emotion, only a dark amusement. Heartless. Compared to what Jonathan and Caitlin did to me, what I was doing was nothing. Besides, the child in her belly was the sharpest knife they had tried to stab me with. How could I have any pity for them? I didn't reply, simply blocking each number. Negotiation. There was no negotiation between us, only a fight to the finish. Jessica told me that Caitlin and Mr. Davies weren't sitting still. They filed a motion to challenge the court's jurisdiction, which was denied. They then argued that the execution of the will was being obstructed and requested a partial release of the frozen assets, which the court also denied, citing insufficient evidence pending trial. Their usual tactics of pressure, delay, and legal maneuvering were failing in the face of our solid evidence. They were now like cornered animals, growing desperate. "But Evelyn, we can't let our guard down," Jessica said over the phone, her voice a mix of contempt and concern. "That Davies guy is shady. I'm worried they'll try something else. Like smearing you in the media, or trying to contact and bribe key witnesses like the accountant at Innovatech, or the condo management, or even..." Jessica paused. "I'm worried they might try to harm you personally. You have to be extra careful." I nodded. Her concerns were valid. A cornered rabbit will bite, let alone people as shameless as Caitlin and Mr. Davies. I beefed up my personal security. The new locks and surveillance system were active. When I went out, I chose busy routes and times. I even signed up for a short-term women's self-defense class. The peace didn't last long. An unexpected person contacted me, David Parker, the vice president of Innovatech. David was one of the company's original employees, one of Jonathan's partners from the start. He was a relatively upright man and had been dissatisfied with some of Jonathan's methods for a while. Before the accident, they had apparently clashed over the company's direction. David asked to meet me at a tea house, saying he had something important to tell me. I hesitated, then consulted Jessica. She thought I should go but be prepared. She advised me to record the entire conversation, and she would wait nearby just in case. At the meeting, David looked much more haggard than the last time I saw him. Mrs. Reed, he greeted me politely, no longer calling me by my first name. Mr. Parker, please sit. I maintained a polite distance. After some small talk, David got straight to the point. Mrs. Reed, I'm very sorry about what happened to Jonathan. The company is in chaos right now. No one's in charge, projects are stalled, and employees are panicking. I listened quietly. The state of the company was not my primary concern at the moment. David looked at me, seemingly having made up his mind. I know you and Jonathan had your issues. It's not my place to say anything, but there are some things I feel you have a right to know. This concerns the future of the company, and it concerns what's fair. He took out a thumb drive and pushed it across the table. This is a backup of some irregular financial records Jonathan asked me to handle before the accident. It contains several wire transfer receipts. The recipient is almost always that Caitlin Monroe. The sums are not small, and they weren't processed through normal business channels. My heart skipped a beat. This could be direct proof of Jonathan embezzling company funds, which were also marital assets. Why did he ask you to do this, and why are you giving this to me now? I asked calmly. David gave a bitter smile. Jonathan got more and more out of line, especially after he got with that woman. He started cooking the books. I tried to warn him, but he wouldn't listen. He saw me as an obstacle. I kept a backup for my own protection in case something happened. Now it looks like I was right. He sighed. Mrs. Reed, I'm not picking sides. I just feel that Jonathan and we built this company from the ground up. I can't just watch an outsider destroy it. This might be useful to you. I studied him, trying to gauge the truth in his words. Was he genuinely trying to protect the company, or was he hedging his bets now that Caitlin's position was weak? Probably both. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that the evidence he provided was real and useful. Thank you, Mr. Parker, I said, taking the drive. This is very important. Also, David lowered his voice, there's something else. Just before the accident, Jonathan seemed particularly anxious. One time when he was drunk, he said something strange to me. What did he say? He said, if I knew it was going to be this much trouble, I never would have listened to her. Never would have listened to her. Her as in Caitlin. What trouble? The trouble of transferring assets or something else? My mind raced with questions, but I kept my expression neutral. I see. Thank you for telling me. After leaving David, I immediately gave the thumb drive to Jessica. The files on it confirmed David's story. It was ironclad proof of Jonathan using fraudulent expenses and fake contracts to funnel company money to Caitlin. This added significant weight to our case. However, just as I thought I could breathe a little easier, a new storm began to gather. It started with a few anonymous posts on local forums and social media gossip pages. The headlines were sensational. Heartless wife refuses to save, husband fights for inheritance. Against grieving mother and child tech CEO dies tragically, wife and mistress battle in court. The content was completely twisted, painting me as a vicious, greedy woman who was cold-blooded enough to watch her husband die. Caitlin, on the other hand, was portrayed as a weak, tragic victim of love, bullied by the cruel wife. Underneath the posts, a horde of online trolls steered the narrative, hurling all sorts of vile insults at me. Although Jessica quickly had the posts taken down through legal channels, the damage was done. Some friends and relatives who didn't know the full story began to look at me differently. I knew this was the work of Caitlin and Mr. Davies. When they couldn't win legally, they resorted to this kind of dirty tactic. Was I angry? Of course. But more than that, I was calm. The more they acted like this, the more it proved they were desperate. Evelyn, don't pay any attention to this garbage, Jessica called to comfort me. I'm not worried, I said calmly. The more they do this, the more I'm determined to win and win beautifully. Jessica, can we counterattack now? They just handed us the ammunition. Jessica's voice was sharp. We can sue them for defamation and libel, and we can use this opportunity to petition the court to investigate the financial links between these troll accounts and Caitlin and Davies. We'll throw this mud right back at them. Not just sue, I said decisively. Let's make it big. They want to use public opinion to crush me. I'll show them what happens when you play with fire. The online slander didn't stop. Anonymous hate mail started appearing in my inbox. One time, someone even stuck chewing gum over the peephole of my apartment door. These petty tactics didn't harm me, but they were a constant buzzing reminder of how desperate and low my enemies were. Jessica's defamation suit was filed, and the court granted our motion for investigation. But tracing online trolls was like fishing in a muddy pond. It would take time. I knew they were trying to wear me down to make me crack under the pressure. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I went about my life as usual, attending my self-defense classes, sorting through Jonathan's company documents. If I won back the shares, I couldn't let the company collapse. It was a prize I deserved and my capital for the future. Then, a new player entered the game. I received a call from an unknown number. The man on the other end claimed to be a reporter from a financial magazine. He wanted to do an in-depth story on the inheritance dispute and hoped to interview me. My guard went up immediately. Any media involvement at this stage was a double-edged sword. "Thank you for your interest, Mr. Zhao," I said cautiously, "but the case is currently in litigation, so I'm not at liberty to be interviewed." "Miss Reed, please understand. We want to present the truth." The reporter's tone was sincere. "We've also contacted Miss Monroe's side, but they declined. We feel it would be biased to only hear one side." His words sounded reasonable, but my suspicions remained. I told him I needed to think about it, asking for his press credentials and his publication's contact information. I immediately had Jessica check him out. The feedback was quick. The magazine was real, and so was the reporter. But he had a reputation for using questionable methods to get a story, and was known to be close to the legal circles Mr. Davies moved in. It was a trap. They wanted to bait me into an interview, provoke me, record any unfavorable statements, and then twist my words to paint me as an aggressive, unreasonable shrew. "Fine," I told Jessica. "If they want to play, let's play big." I called the reporter back and agreed to the interview, but with strict conditions. First, my lawyer Jessica had to be present. Second, the entire interview must be audio and video recorded with us, keeping a complete copy. Third, the final article had to be submitted to us for review before publication. The reporter hesitated, but eventually agreed. On the day of the interview, I dressed in a professional dark blue pantsuit. Jessica was by my side, a picture of legal competence. The reporter, Mr. Zhao, arrived with a cameraman. His questions started off gently about Jonathan's startup, our marriage. I answered objectively, as Jessica and I had planned, highlighting our shared struggles and past affection. Then his questions turned sharp. "Miss Reed, we understand that at the critical moment, you chose to give up on resuscitation and even said send him straight to the crematorium. Isn't that a bit cold? What were you thinking at that moment?" This was the ambush. I looked at him, my gaze steady. "Mr. Zhao, if you were there and you heard your spouse of 10 years at the brink of death, use a lawyer to announce he was leaving everything to another woman, a woman who was pregnant with his child, what would you do? Would you sign the papers that could leave you bankrupt to save a man whose heart and loyalty were already gone?" My calm was not inborn. It was carved into me piece by piece by the one person I trusted most. That wasn't coldness. It was clarity born from despair. He was momentarily stunned but pressed on. "And what about the inheritance? You're determined to sue, even freezing all the assets. Have you considered the situation of Miss Monroe and her unborn child? After all, a child is innocent." "A child is innocent," I countered. "But an adult who uses a child as a tool for extortion is not. Mr. Zhao, the money Miss Monroe received was our marital property. Jonathan's malicious transfer of those assets was illegal. I am not just protecting my personal rights. I am defending the sanctity of the law. If this kind of behavior is not stopped, what does it say about marriage?" I looked directly at the camera. "As for Miss Monroe and her child, I trust the law will render a fair judgment, but that fairness cannot be built on a foundation of illegality and malice." The interview ended shortly after. They never published the story. We had turned their trap into our platform. However, the quiet didn't last. Jessica learned through her channels that Caitlin and Davies had hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. They were looking for anything past relationships, financial dealings, any scandal they could use. They wanted to play dirty. Fine, I would give them a taste of their own medicine. My focus returned to Innovatech. The company was in limbo. Caitlin held the faulty will, claiming ownership of the shares. I, as the legal wife, was challenging it. The company couldn't survive this paralysis. I met with David Parker again. David, we have to act. Jonathan's embezzlement harmed not just me, but you and the other shareholders. We can unite the other minority shareholders, sue Caitlin on behalf of the company, and demand she return the stolen funds. Theoretically, yes, he said, but we need a board resolution. The company governance is paralyzed. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures, I said firmly. We'll call an emergency shareholder meeting. We'll argue that Caitlin's claim is tainted by her role in harming the company and seek to temporarily suspend her voting rights. If we can get enough support, we can pass a resolution authorizing you and our lawyers to act on the company's behalf. I raised the stakes. If this succeeds, you'll be the one who saved the company. Your position will be unshakable. David was a man of action. He saw the logic and the opportunity. He agreed. Meanwhile, Jessica brought more good news. The court, based on our overwhelming evidence, had issued a preliminary opinion indicating they were leaning in our favor, viewing the will as a violation of public policy. Caitlin and Davies were clearly panicking. Their desperation took a new pathetic turn. I received a call from a woman with a thick rural accent. "Is this Miss Evelyn Reed?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Who is this? I'm Caitlin's mother." Her voice broke into a sob. "Miss Reed, I'm begging you have mercy. Let my daughter go. She's young. She was fooled by Mr. Reed. She's pregnant. She cries all day. Her lawyer said she might lose the case, lose all the money. Please, for the baby's sake, drop the lawsuit. The baby again." Their only card. "Ma'am," I said coldly, "your daughter knew Jonathan was married. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Dropping the lawsuit is impossible." Her tone instantly turned venomous. "You cruel woman, don't push us too far. We have nothing to lose. If you ruin Caitlin, we'll make you pay." A threat. I hung up and blocked the number. But I knew this was a signal. They were getting ready for a final, desperate move. Sure enough, David Parker called me a few days later, furious. He had received anonymous threats. A dead rat was left on his doorstep. "They're despicable," he fumed. "This just proves we've hit them where it hurts," I said. "Report it to the police, and let's move faster. Call the shareholder meeting." The threats only solidified the resolve of David and the other minority shareholders. The emergency meeting was called. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. I sat at the plaintiff's table, Jessica beside me. Across from us sat a pale Mr. Davies and a visibly panicked Caitlin, her slightly rounded belly emphasized by a loose-fitting dress. The trial began. Mr. Davies went first, clinging to the notarized will, painting me as a greedy, heartless villain. Jessica waited patiently. When Davies again brought up Caitlin, carrying Jonathan's only bloodline, Jessica stood. "Your Honor," her voice was clear and strong. "The defense repeatedly emphasizes that Miss Monroe is carrying Mr. Reed's child. But is that truly the case?" She presented a document. "This is the sonogram report Miss Monroe has been using from a private clinic." Caitlin looked momentarily smug. However, Jessica continued holding up another official-looking document with a hospital seal. "We have subpoenaed the records from that clinic. On the date of this supposed sonogram, Miss Monroe was never a patient there. The sonogram is a fake." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Caitlin's face drained of all color. Davies shot to his feet in shock. "Impossible! You're lying!" Caitlin shrieked. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order." Jessica pressed her advantage, delivering the final devastating blow. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have obtained Miss Monroe's actual verified prenatal records from a public hospital taken after Mr. Reed's death. Based on fetal development, the estimated time of conception is significantly later than when Mr. Reed created this will. In other words, when Jonathan Reed wrote this will, he had no idea this child even existed. His motive was not to protect his bloodline, but a pure and simple act of malicious asset transfer. The case was over. Jessica then systematically presented all our other evidence, the chat logs, the wire transfers, the company's financial records from David, even the evidence of them hiring trolls and threatening a witness. It was a mountain of proof. The judge delivered the verdict on the spot. The court found that Jonathan Reed had engaged in a long-term affair and maliciously transferred a large amount of marital property. His will, which sought to disinherit his legal spouse and give everything to a third party with whom he had an illicit relationship, was a severe violation of public policy and morality. The verdict. The will of Jonathan Reed bequeathing his entire estate to Caitlin Monroe is declared null and void. The estate will be divided according to the laws of intestate succession. Given the deceased's severe fault, the plaintiff Evelyn Reed is entitled to a larger or even the entire portion of the marital assets that were hidden or transferred. Miss Caitlin Monroe is ordered to return all illicit gains received from Jonathan Reed. Miss Monroe's act of forging medical documents and interfering with judicial proceedings will be referred to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. All court costs are to be borne by the defendants. The gavel fell. A final resounding crack. We had won. Jessica hugged me, tears in her eyes. The gallery erupted. I saw my mother-in-law weeping, and I heard Caitlin's broken sobs as she was led away by bailiffs. She shot me one last look of pure, undiluted hatred. I met her gaze my own, empty of any emotion. She was nothing to me now. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. I stopped, faced the cameras, and took a deep breath. The law has given me justice, I said slowly, but this is not a victory. It is the end of a tragedy. The 10 years of my life and love that I lost cannot be replaced by money. As for Miss Monroe and her child, the law will run its course. I only want to say this as people: we must have boundaries. You cannot take what does not belong to you. What you gain by hurting others, you will eventually lose, and it will cost you far more. The subsequent division of assets was smooth. I gave Helen enough to live comfortably in her retirement. I sold the suburban condo, that monument to betrayal. I sold the home Jonathan and I had shared. I started over. Caitlin was sentenced to prison for fraud and perjury. The true father of her child remained a mystery. Mr. Davies was disbarred. I didn't bother to follow their fates. My life had turned a new page. I used the money I recovered along with my own savings to invest in a promising tech startup, becoming a majority shareholder. I was no longer a housewife living in a man's shadow, but an independent woman with her own career. A year later, I stood on the shore of Lake Michigan. The water and sky were a vast, clear blue. I took off the wedding ring that had long lost its meaning and threw it with all my might into the water. It traced a silver arc in the air before disappearing into the deep blue, leaving no ripple, just like that terrible past finally sunk and gone forever. I turned the wind on my face and walked toward my future. The sun fell on my shoulders, warm and bright. My name is Evelyn Reed. I once fell into hell, but I climbed back out on my own and became a better version of myself.